Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about my week number 16 waiver wire pickups for fantasy football in 2021. Inside today's video, we're going to be going in depth into some running backs, wide receivers, as well as tight ends that I believe you guys should be looking to pick up off the waiver wire right now. But before we could get on into things, I would like to ask, if you are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, to please make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below, because not only is it free, I put out content every single day to help you guys win your 2021 Fantasy Football Championship. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do hit that like button down below to help boost this video up the algorithm so that more beautiful people like yourself can see today's video. I would also like to ask, if you guys are on Twitter and would like to follow me on there, to please do so at Notorious FNTSY. The link to my Twitter is also down below in the video description. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 16 waiver wire pickups. We begin with the running back position, headlined by Ronald Jones, running back of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, going up against the Carolina Panthers this week in Carolina. Now, earlier on in the week, it was reported by Ian Rappaport that Leonard Fournette avoided a serious hamstring injury, but will miss about a game or two. And then it was reported more recently yesterday that there is potential that Leonard Fournette ends up landing on the injured reserve. If that is the case, then Leonard Fournette will be out for the rest of the season, and Ronald Jones could be a potential league winner, because then there is no way that Leonard Fournette could end up returning. If he does end up missing just one game, then Ronald Jones will be very helpful this week, but obviously once Leonard Fournette would end up returning, then Ronald Jones's value would go back to being very minuscule. But based upon the most recent report that he is going to be out for potentially the rest of the season, I am all in on Ronald Jones. Now, I understand that Ronald Jones didn't play all that great this season. A lot of people had some high hopes that he could potentially be the number one running back on the team, but Leonard Fournette had a clear stranglehold over that. But even with that said, Ronald Jones has shown flashes in his career. He's shown flashes last year. He's even shown some small flashes this year that he is a very solid running back. And I believe with him now being the clear lead back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, that Ronald Jones is going to dominate. Last week, up against the New Orleans Saints, after Leonard Fournette ended up getting hurt, he had 8 rushes for 63 yards, as well as 2 receptions on 2 targets for 8 yards. Now, I'm not saying that Ronald Jones is going to be able to put up the exact same production that Leonard Fournette will be able to put up. If that was the case, then I bet you this season we would see a 50-50 split between Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette. But I do believe that Ronald Jones will be successful and does have the upside to be a top 12 running back on the week up against the Carolina Panthers. The next running back to discuss is Samaje Perine, running back of the Cincinnati Bengals, going up against the Baltimore Ravens this week at home in Cincinnati. The Bengals head coach Zach Taylor said that Joe Mixon suffered an ankle sprain on Sunday up against the Denver Broncos. Zach Taylor did seem hopeful that Joe Mixon would be back this week, but he did state that Joe Mixon was going to be limited in practice to start off the week. If Mixon returns, then Samaje Perine is completely and utterly fucking irrelevant, because Joe Mixon is going to be seeing a majority of the work. But if Joe Mixon was not able to go in this matchup up against the Ravens, then Samaje Perine could easily be a top 24 running back on the week up against the Baltimore Ravens. In week 15 up against the Denver Broncos, Perine had 4 rushes for 30 yards, as well as 2 receptions on 2 targets for 13 yards. So again, is he kind of on the same level as a guy like Ronald Jones? No, but if we were to see Joe Mixon miss a game this week, then I do think Samaje Perine is certainly startable in your semifinal playoff matchup. Next up, we move to Justin Jackson, running back of the LA Chargers, going up against the Houston Texans this week in Houston. Austin Eckler was initially reported to be placed on the reserve/COVID list, but according to the official NFL transaction wire, Eckler was not actually placed on that list. So is that precautionary? What is going to end up happening? Frankly, I have no fucking idea. If Austin Eckler is able to play, then I still do believe, though, that Justin Jackson has at least some value based upon what we saw last week up against the Kansas City Chiefs. If you have Austin Eckler, if you have Joe Mixon, then you need to make sure to handcuff them with their backups. This is something that I talked about in last week's waiver wire video. Try to get ahead of it. If your backup running back is out there, then go ahead and pick them up, even if the main running back isn't injured. Because if you're able to make it to the championship, you want to make sure that if some crazy shit was to happen with all these players getting COVID, that you have the handcuff for both of your starting running backs. So last week, Justin Jackson up against the Kansas City Chiefs, 13 rushes for 86 yards, as well as 1 reception on 1 target for 13 yards. And that is in a game game that Austin Eckler played. Now, do I believe that he'll be able to do the same thing potentially this week up against Houston? Maybe, even if Eckler is in, because the Houston Texans are so dog shit that they may be up by 1,000,000 points, and they just run the ball with Justin Jackson down the stretch of the game. So I like Justin Jackson this week. Am I in love with him if Austin Eckler is in the game? No, but otherwise, I do think Justin Jackson has a shit ton of upside this week up against the Houston Texans. My next running back to discuss is Duke Johnson, running back of the Miami Dolphins, going up against the New Orleans Saints in New Orleans in the Superdome, I'm pretty sure is what their stadium is called, on Monday Night Football. Duke Johnson was signed to the active roster on Monday following a phenomenal performance up against the Jumbo Jets on Sunday in Week 15 up against the Jets. 22 carries for 107 yards and not one, but 2 touchdowns in that game, 1 reception on 1 target for 20 yards as well. But it is very unknown going forward what Duke Johnson's role is going to be. Now, he was signed to the active roster, so he's definitely going to play. But the question is he going to be ahead of Myles Gaskin or behind Myles Gaskin? Because the reason behind why Myles Gaskin wasn't uber involved in the game script last week is unknown. Because on one hand, you can make the argument that, oh, Myles Gaskin didn't practice all week. Duke Johnson did. So based upon how they practiced all week, they liked what they saw to Duke Johnson. They didn't want to get Myles Gaskin banged up or something because he wasn't practicing all week. So they just rolled with Duke Johnson. They let Myles Gaskin play a little bit. But overall, Duke Johnson was the clear lead back. But you can also make the other argument that, oh, even if Gaskin was playing last week, then maybe Duke Johnson was able to overcome him, and he is now the clear lead back on the team. So there's 2 arguments you can really make about it. Which side am I on? If I'm being honest with you, I'm on the side that this is probably going to be right in the middle. This is now going to be a snap split, a split share, a load share, whatever the fuck you want to call it, between 2 running backs, meaning that Duke Johnson's going to be getting the ball, as will Myles Gaskin, and that's kind of going to make both of them irrelevant in fantasy football unless one of them ends up scoring a touchdown. So I'm going to pick up Duke Johnson because there is genuinely potential that Brian Flores saw what happened. We saw that Duke Johnson was running through motherfuckers' faces and was actually playing quite well, and they just end up letting Duke Johnson be the lead back. So for that reason, and that reason alone, I want to be picking up Duke Johnson. Am I very confident in playing him this week up against the Saints? No, but he's certainly worthy of a waiver wire pickup. My final running back to discuss before we pivot into the wide receiver and the tight end position, I would like to talk about Craig Reynolds, running back of the Detroit Lions, going up against the Atlanta Falcons this week in Atlanta. Jamal Williams has been activated off of the reserve/COVID list. DeAndre Swift, if he is activated, then this kind of falls into irrelevancy for Craig Reynolds. But even if Jamal Williams plays, I think that Craig Reynolds has earned a role in this offense based upon his last 2 showings. Last week up against the Arizona Cardinals, the Cardinals got absolutely fucking eviscerated by Craig Reynolds. 26 carries for 112 yards, 1 reception on 1 target for 5 yards. Now, I think Jamal Williams coming back certainly puts a damper on the upside. But I would still add him off the good chance, or off of the potential chance, I should say, that Craig Reynolds is now the lead running back without DeAndre Swift. But before we pivot into the wide receiver position, I would like to ask that if you have ended up enjoying thus far, to please make sure that you do hit that subscribe button down below, as well as hitting that like button. It would help me out a ton. So now, let's pivot to the wide receiver position, beginning with another Detroit Lions player. We got Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver of the Detroit Lions, going up against the Atlanta Falcons this week in Atlanta. Now, I believe that it is very safe to say, very safe to assume, that Amon-Ra St. Brown is the clear #1 lead wide receiver in Detroit, with over 11 targets in each of his last 3 games. 11 targets last week, the 2 games before, exactly 12 targets in each of those 2 games. Week 15 up against the Arizona Cardinals, 8 receptions on 11 targets for 90 yards and a touchdown. He also had 1 rush for 5 yards. That's not something that's necessarily baked into Amon-Ra St. Brown's value. Like a guy like, say, Deebo Samuel may get 2 or 3 rushes a game. I don't think you should assume that every week Amon-Ra St. Brown will be able to get multiple rushes in a game. Going up against the Atlanta Falcons, I understand that the Detroit Lions are far from an ideal offense. I understand that they're not amazing, but based upon the sheer amount of volume that St. Brown is getting, he could easily finish as a top 12, maybe even a top 5 wide receiver up against the sorry-ass Atlanta Falcons defense, so I love Amon-Ra St. Brown this week. Next up, we pivot to Gabriel Davis, wide receiver of the Buffalo Bills, going up against the New England Deflatriots this week in Foxborough. If Emmanuel Sanders misses again, then it is going to be very clear that Gabe Davis will be the number 2 wide receiver for the Buffalo Bills. We also know Cole Beasley is out for 10 days due to COVID, so he is not going to be able to play in this game. So I think even if Emmanuel Sanders was to return, that I'm still comfortable playing Gabe Davis because Cole Beasley will be out. Last week, up against the Carolina Panthers, Gabriel Davis had 5 receptions on 7 targets for 85 yards and 2 tutties in that matchup, scoring 4 total touchdowns in the last 3 games. Very impressive for Gabe Davis. Again, Emmanuel Sanders' health up in the air. Cole Beasley definitely out. I understand this matchup is far from a wet dream matchup like we kind of just described with Amon-Ra St. Brown going up against the Falcons, but I still really do like Gabe Davis this week. Next up, we pivot to Allen Lazard, wide receiver of the Green Bay Packers, going up against the Cleveland Browns. Now, in the previous version of this video that wasn't posted, I talked about how I loved Marquez Valdes-Scantling. But evidently, the Packers place MVS, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, on the COVID list. So doesn't seem like he's going to play, so Allen Lazard should slot in as the number 2 wide receiver behind Davante Adams, and I think without MVS there really isn't much competition for Allen Lazard, which is why I'm pretty confident in saying he is going to be the number 2 wide receiver behind Adams in this game on Christmas. Last week, up against the Baltimore Ravens, Lazard had 2 receptions on 4 targets for 23 yards, as well as 1 rush for 5 yards. In that game, Marquez Valdes-Scantling really shined, but again, he's not going to be playing this week, so I think Allen Lazard could put up really solid numbers this week up against the Browns defense. Next up, we move to Laquan Treadwell, wide receiver of the Jacksonville Jaguars, going up against the New York Jumbo Jets this week in MetLife. Weirdly enough, this is very weird. If you asked me at the beginning of the season, hey Nick, can you name who the number 1 receiver is going to be for the Jacksonville Jaguars? Oh, I gotcha. I thought it was Marvin Jones. Some people probably thought Laviska Shenault. Others thought DJ Chark, DJ Chark. But it turns out when the lights shine the brightest in the fantasy football playoffs, it's fucking Laquan Treadwell. Last week up against the Texans, 6 receptions on 9 targets, 6 of 9. Very nice, I like, for 57 yards. Laquan fucking Treadwell is the number 1 receiver. Urban Meyer, the bad man is gone. Treadwell's been eaten like Ezekiel Elliott on Thanksgiving dinner. I'm fine starting Treadwell, especially up against the sorry-ass Jumbo Jets. Final wide receiver to discuss before we pivot into the tight end position, Tyler Johnson, wide receiver of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, going up against the Carolina Panthers this week in Carolina. Chris Godwin is out for the season after having a torn ACL last week up against the New Orleans Saints. Mike Evans, in that exact same game, suffered a hamstring strain and is considered week to week. Highly improbable that he plays this week. Again, not a fucking doctor. I'm as much of a doctor as the ones you watch on the other tube that starts with red, not YouTube, the other one. But there is still technically a chance he plays, but I don't think he's going to end up playing. This is going to elevate, in my opinion, Tyler Johnson to the number 2 role, as Antonio Brown is believed to be good to go 100% to play this week, so AB will be the number 1. Tyler Johnson will be the number 2 in Week 15 up against the Saints after all those injuries happened, after the team fucking collapsed. 4 receptions on 7 targets for 41 yards for Tyler Johnson. This is a very solid scenario to be in. Now I understand, but Nick, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Tampa Bay Tom Brady just got absolutely butt-fucked, absolutely destroyed by the Saints. Nick, they didn't even score a fucking point. How are they going to bounce back? Of course they're going to bounce back, and they're going to bounce back very strong by slapping the shit out of the Carolina Panthers, so I like Tyler Johnson a ton this week. Am I very confident in it? No, because there is a chance that a Scotty Miller or some other wide receiver becomes the number 2 guy. But based upon the numbers, based upon what we've seen with the eye test this season, just whipping out the microscope, looking at the games, it seems as though Tyler Johnson will fill in as the number 2 receiver on this team. Finally, we move to the tight end position, headlined by Mr. Cole Comet, tight end of the Chicago Bears, going up against the Seattle Seahawks this week in Seattle. Going up against the Seahawks, we should be able to see Cole Comet have yet another strong performance last week up against Kirk Cousins, Mr. You Like That, and the Minnesota Vikings. Cole Comet also 6 of 9, 6 receptions receptions on 9 targets. Very nice. I like for 71 yards. Very nice. For Mr. Cole Comet. Love that. We did see some random tight end come out of nowhere like an RKO from Randy fucking Orton and catch that touchdown at the last second of the game. That wasn't a touchdown. Don't know what they were smoking to call that a touchdown. That wasn't a touchdown, but they called it a touchdown. Matt Nagy's a fucking idiot. I don't even know how his key card worked on Monday morning. I don't know how this fucker still has a job. He's such a fucking idiot. But at the end of the day, despite the idiocracy, despite the fact that Matt Nagy is a fucking dumbass, Cole Kmet is still fine. So, with that said, start Kmet up against the Seahawks. Final tight end to discuss is Adam Troutman, the fish man himself of the New Orleans Saints, going up against the Miami Dolphins. Troutman returned from injury last week. Shockingly, it was basically fucking written in stone that he was out for the season, but magically he's back. He did not perform all that well in that game up against the Bucs. 1 reception on 2 targets for 4 yards against the Bucs. Again, that was a very low-scoring game, 9-0. But with a full week of practice, with a game that, in my opinion, is not going to be 9-0 like that other game, I think Adam Troutman will be just fine. It is very hard to find tight end streaming options, so I think Adam Troutman could definitely get it done this week up against the Miami Dolphins. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. If you did end up enjoying, please make sure to hit that like button as well as that subscribe button. I would appreciate it a ton. I love you guys all. I hope you have a great rest of your guys' day, and as always, goodbye.